I'm Pastor Cameron Martin, and this is The Pursuit. If you haven't watched last week's episode, or our last episode, you should go back and check that out before going into this one. These next few weeks, starting with last week, are all tied together into the same flow of idea. This one does stand on its own, but I'll be referring back to that one. It's called I'm Not Dead Yet. This week, we're calling this one You're Dead to Me, because we're invited into new life with Jesus, but it's preceded by joining him in his death. So how do we do that? We start by severing our connection to the old person or source. We must be brought to nothing and connect to the only true source of new life. So again, last week we looked at our need to die, and this week we look at exactly how we might kill off the old self. You've probably heard this idea referred to on crime dramas and forensic shows as cause of death. You know, a cop turns up at a crime scene and asks cause of death, and the reply might be GSW to the chest. GSW is short for gunshot wound. I don't know why they think that's shorter. Gunshot wound is 3 syllables and GSW is 5. But I suppose it looks shorter in the script because it's 3 letters. Anyhow, sever. This is where we start. We start by severing our connection to the old man. And today we're starting in Matthew 16:24, which says, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." So the word rendered deny here means to abstain, to affirm that one has no acquaintance or connection with someone, to forget oneself, lose sight of oneself, and one's own self-interest. It's the biblical equivalent of our phrase, "You're dead to me," which is why I used that for the title this week. However, in this case, when we say "you're dead to me," we happen to be looking in the mirror. So if someone were to say that phrase to someone, it would mean we would no longer acknowledge them or their desires. So we would sever our connection to them, lose sight of them, and forget them altogether. In this case, it's us. So again, if we were saying that to ourselves, we would no longer acknowledge ourselves or our desires, and we would lose sight of ourselves and forget ourselves altogether. Going back to our baptism reference last week, we don't just rinse off and celebrate. We sever our connection to our past when we join Jesus in his death and deny ourselves. We maintain the disconnection to our past when we pick up our cross daily. We do maintenance on our disconnect. So this is going to take a whole lot of no. When we become proficient, we might be like Neo in the Matrix at the end of the movie when all the bullets are coming at him and he just simply puts up his hand barely and says, no. All the bullets that the world can throw at us, all the flaming arrows or fiery darts, depending on the translation you might be reading. And no matter where they come from or when they come, we should be able to simply, calmly, in the peace of the Lord, say, no. Just no. Because we won't be physically, emotionally invested in the outcome. Because all of our spiritual investment will be in the kingdom of heaven, and so that will carry the most weight, and it will pull along our emotions and our will and our soul. So we can just simply practice saying, no, I'm not going to respond to that. I'm not going to react to that. I'm not going to allow those feelings of me feeling left out or wanting to pout or throw a tantrum, and I'm going to recognize that that feeling is some lie about God rearing up inside me. He's not there. He's not listening. He's not paying attention. He doesn't care, whatever it might be. So we can just hopefully, when proficient again, this is when fully matured essentially, we can just say no. Now this is going to probably require making along the way, making declarations or renouncing past actions or relationships, things we've done with others, to others, things we didn't do for others that maybe we know we should have. It also might include repenting of things our old body used to do and establishing new habits. It may also take more than one try, but we pick up our cross and we keep our eyes on Jesus. Those are the two actions that we're going to see draw us through this. We pick up our cross and we keep our eyes on Jesus, just like he said in Matthew 16:24. So we do what we see him doing. That's how we follow him. So we might assume Jesus's point in Matthew 16:24 is, you must be completely committed to me and leave behind your former life, or I won't accept you as a disciple. Let me read it again. He says, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. But he may not be saying that if you can't do that, I won't accept you, if he would come after me. Because the word, we're past that. However, if we assume that he is saying you have to leave your life behind or I won't accept you as a disciple, that's an assumption. He could just as easily have meant, if you're not willing to let go of everything you've learned and everything you believed in your old life, then you won't have room in your heart or mind for all you will learn or believe from me. Let me say that again. If we're not willing to let go of everything that we've learned in the past, then we're not going to have room for everything that he wants to teach us or that we will need to embrace as convictions. So we need an emptying out of our old ideas, and it will likely be a process, and we'll cover that better in a few weeks when we talk about transformation. So we start off with severing. That's the first step, is severing. And then the second step is we need to be brought to nothing. And I'm taking that out of Romans, where Paul says, we know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be, here it is, brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. Now that word rendered nothing can mean to be unemployed, which seems kind of funny. I think it's funny. We're talking about a body we simply have no use for in our old man. Could we simply say to the old man, you're fired? So we've got two options here. We can say, you're dead to me, or we can fire that old guy, our old man. That word that's rendered nothing, be brought to nothing, that word could also be rendered as cease, or translated as cease, to cease. We're looking at this process, and we were connected to an unhealthy source. We severed that connection, and now there will be a period when the line that we severed flows out, continues to flow, and flows out until what we've received from the former connection ceases. That's what we're seeing here. So again, with our analogy of the body, if we continue with that death illustration, we were fed by an unhealthy source, and it flowed through us. It just, it gets in and then it continues to flow throughout our body. But when we cut the line through which our life flows, which again, keeping with the death reference, would be our veins, we cut that line and we bled out. We let it drain. This is how we are brought to nothing. We let it drain out its life, that old life, as we resist going back until the pull fades. We let that life, that old contaminated life draining out is going to take some time, and we'll feel that draining out as we continue to resist going back to our old ways until that pull fades. We resist for a while, and that pull over time will become less and less until the habits and routines and addictions, which were facilitated via the former source of life, are completely drained of their energy and influence. So we keep busy picking up the cross of Christ. We go back to what Jesus said. We pick up that cross, we carry it, we deny ourselves. And that picking up of the cross is us staying focused on what he is doing, that we might follow his pattern for living until we can say, like Paul says in Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. That doesn't sound like someone who has simply changed their mind or changed their opinion, because we're talking about a complete death to what happened before. So when we decided to follow Jesus, we didn't just accept or start agreeing with a new idea we heard and something that seemed edgy or cool or what the culture was doing. It was something, we marked a line in the sand. There's a date on the calendar. We died here. Everything before that is different from everything after that. So how do we know this has actually happened, at least to some degree, where there was a stark end and an identifiable new start? So if we've been baptized, then we have acknowledged that everything that came before Jesus is dead and gone. Baptism is burial. However, if we're walking through life continually redeciding whether or not we're all in, then we're obviously not dead. We're still deciding between the old life and the new life. And once we receive God's gift of new life, we acknowledge that the old is gone and the new has come. So we've got severing, we've got being brought to nothing, and lastly, our last point is we have to connect, or we might look at it as reconnecting. We have to disconnect from the old life source, and then we have to get reconnected, but this time into a new life source. So I'm just calling it saying we need to connect. So sever, be brought to nothing, and then connect. So we do that, again, by acknowledging there is only one source of new life, and we have to connect to that source. In John 15:4, Jesus says, a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine. So again, see, we're not going to produce the fruit of the old life if we're severed from that one. But we also cannot produce fruit from the new life and the better vine, the true vine, if we remain severed. We have to reconnect. We have to connect or graft in. Again, Jesus says, a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Previously, we were connected to the wrong vine, the wrong source, an unhealthy source. And in Matthew 7:18, Jesus also says, a healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. So before Jesus, we could only produce bad fruit. We could do kind and helpful things, and so can those who don't know Jesus, but they will not carry the life of Jesus. Those actions won't carry the life of Jesus. They won't have the same eternal value. Just as the process began last week, or our last message, with an acknowledgement that we need to die, the process can continue when we acknowledge where we find life. That's worth contending for. So let's continue doing that together at jointhepursuit.net. Hope to see you there and back here again next time.